In the last several months, we in New Bedford have come to learn more about the offshore wind industry and have witnessed a number of important steps toward the establishment of the industry right here in the city of New Bedford. Among those steps was the announcement of the power purchase agreement that will enable Cape Wind to sell its electricity and obtain financing. Just last week, Congress passed the extension of the production tax credit for wind industry that will make future offshore wind projects in the United States more financially feasible. And most of all, the Environmental Protection Agency recently gave the green light to the construction of the nation's first purpose-built marine terminal for offshore wind assembly right here in the city of New Bedford. We are here today to announce another big step forward for offshore wind's prospects in New Bedford. As I've said many times, it is no exaggeration that offshore wind represents the single most important business opportunity for New Bedford and the surrounding region in decades. Offshore wind farms are coming to America. They've been in Europe for 20 years and are already underway in China and other countries. Along the southern coast of New England, we are one of the few deepwater ports who can take advantage of the fact that so much of the wind reserves in the United States lie just south of here. We have great highway access, and our residents have the seafaring and manufacturing skills that the industry needs to thrive. And soon, as I said, we'll have that state-of-the-art marine terminal to assemble windmills. The question is, how do we here in New Bedford capitalize on these advantages? How do we position New Bedford to become the center of the offshore wind industry in America, knowing that there are certain things that we can't control, like the financing for wind projects or the incentives that certain states give to wind production projects? The answer begins with the recognition that we need to have better insight into this brand new industry than other places do. We need to make sure that we get the best information possible so that we can properly market our city to companies in the offshore wind supply chain and support those companies that set up here or expand here. Toward this end, I am pleased to announce today the formation of the Mayor's Offshore Wind Advisory Committee. And I am joined here today by several members of that committee, whom I will introduce in a moment. The purpose of the committee is to provide me with their insights into industry trends relating to the global supply chain for offshore wind and how New Bedford can position itself to meet the industry's needs. The members are industry and manufacturing representatives and new participants who will add additional insight into the potential growth of the market and New Bedford's role in it. They are deeply invested in a shared vision that New Bedford will become a center of the offshore wind industry in the United States. The committee will meet regularly, and its work will be facilitated by Matt Morrissey, the Executive Director of the Economic Development Council, New Bedford Economic Development Council. Let me go through the members of the industry. They fall into different categories, industry categories. First, there are the developers of wind farms here in the United States. And there are basically three people who have established, three companies that have established themselves as the leaders at this point in the industry, and they're all represented by their chief executives on this committee. This is one of the most significant things about this committee. We have the leaders in the industry as it exists in the United States right now serving on this committee. They are Jim Gordon, whom all of you know well by now, the CEO of Cape Wind, whose company is developing what will become the first offshore wind farm in the United States. Jeff Grabowski of Deepwater Wind, another leader in the industry whose company is positioned to be one of the next in the pipeline. And same with Dan Cohen, who's the president of Fisherman's Energy, again, another company that is positioned well to become a next participant in line. Dan, I will note also, and we'll call Dan up in a moment, Dan's company is a diverse one and is one that has already a presence here in New Bedford in the seafood industry. In addition, who's not here today is a representative of Siemens Energy, Thomas Mouston, who's in charge of Siemens' offshore wind division in the United States. A very significant player. For those of you who don't know Siemens effectively is the General Electric of Europe. It's a huge multinational, and that we have the likes of Siemens participating on this committee is very significant. Joel Whitman, who's the Director of Strategic Development, Global Marine Strategies, another important player in both engineering and consulting in the offshore wind industry, whom you'll hear from in a moment. We have local manufacturers here. The reason for that is we would like to attract as much of the supply chain in this industry as possible, but we also strongly believe that the supply chain already exists, potential supply chain already exists here in the United States, and here in New Bedford in particular. We have 3 local manufacturers represented here, our leading local manufacturers, who, whether or not their companies participate in the supply chain, ultimately have tremendous insights into the labor market here, as well as their relationships with the city of New Bedford. And those gentlemen are Tony Sapienza, the CEO of Joseph Abboud Company, Dave Slutz, the CEO of Precise, and Joe Nauman, Senior Vice President and General Counsel at the Acushnet Company. Labor is represented as well. We have Gerard Duge, who's the President of New England Maritime Trade Union here, affiliated with the AFL-CIO. Again, we need, in order to succeed, we need to have an engaged workforce here. There are many members of the maritime trades here in New Bedford, and our goal ultimately is to maximize the job opportunities to folks living in the city of New Bedford, and it's important to have labor at the table in that way in order for these companies to get off the ground, in order for our residents to capitalize on the opportunities. Last, and certainly not least, is Bill White, who is the Director of Offshore Wind Development at the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center. We have a great relationship with the state, and it has played out over especially the last several months as we've attempted to get the terminal off the ground, and it's going off the ground, and so much of that work was done by Bill White and others at the CEC, as well as in the Patrick administration. The Patrick administration is a tremendous supporter of the efforts here in New Bedford, and we couldn't do anything here in offshore wind, frankly, without them. And it's a testament both to Governor Patrick's leadership, but also his insight into the industry and his forward-thinking approach to redeveloping a city like ours. So with that, I would like enough of talk now, but from me, what I'd like to do is to call up the following individuals who can speak for a couple of minutes about the opportunities here and the role they see they're playing here in New Bedford on this committee. This is all really with a view toward the future, not just the Cape Wind project, which is very important, but really a much larger development of an industry all along our coast, in which New Bedford is the industrial center. There will be many ports involved in this industry in operations and maintenance, as well as production, all along the East Coast. There is an area that has been designated by the federal government just south of Martha's Vineyard that is slated for offshore wind development, and there will be business opportunities all along the coast. But what we're shaping up now is New Bedford's centrality in that picture. New Bedford will be the focal point of all that develops in the industry in the years to come in the Northeast. And I'm very pleased that we here in New Bedford are aligned very strongly behind the industry, and we stand ready to do whatever we can. I know that the City Council is firmly behind it. City Council is represented by Jim Oliveira today, who's not only a city councilor but has tremendous business experience. Len Coriarty from the Workforce Development Board, Workforce Investment Board, who's here as well. We're well represented, also by the Harbor Development Commission, Jeff Steeb, our executive director. We are aligned directly behind these efforts because offshore wind is a tremendous opportunity for the city, and we're going to do everything that we can to capitalize on it. And with that, let me call up Mark Rogers from Cape Wind, who is a senior executive at Cape Wind, who works side by side with Jim Gordon, who couldn't be here today. And I'm just, Mark, pleased that you're here today and look forward to your remarks.
Thank you, Mayor Mitchell. Yes, Jim very much wanted to be here, but was out of state today. He looks forward to participating personally in this important task force. Esbjerg, Cuxhaven, Bremerhaven, these were all industrial European ports that by the 1980s were kind of down on their luck. Rising unemployment, declining maritime industries. Many people in these cities felt that their best days were behind them. There's been a big turnaround in these places in the past 20 years, and one of the biggest reasons has been that these cities have all become hubs of the global offshore wind industry. And we see today the Scottish whaling port of Leith struggling and working hard to try to join their ranks. This is the kind of future that Mayor Mitchell, Matthew Morrissey, many of the city leaders here in New Bedford, as well as Governor Patrick, Secretary Sullivan, Bill White, all share for New Bedford. It's rare in our country today for leaders to have that long-term vision, to display leadership that tries to manage today's challenges with looking to future trends. And how do you deal with today's challenges to position yourself in a way to really prosper with these future trends? And that's what I see happening right now in New Bedford. And it isn't all about the future. It's important for people in New Bedford to know that this work is already well underway. Just this past summer, Cape Wind, one of our contractors, Fugro International, which is a nation's leading geotechnical and geophysical company, they had to assemble a special purpose jackup barge, and it's too expensive for them to transport that barge across the world, so they actually break it down into containers, put it on a container ship, and then reassemble it. And they did that here in New Bedford just a few months ago. We had the mayor come down as they were finishing their work to inspect it and take a look. And you know, while they were here, they stayed in the local hotels, ate in the local restaurants, the local hardware store. A New Bedford firm, Fathom Research, was involved in analyzing the sediments that were collected from this geotechnical and geophysical survey. And you know, just to drop a few other names, they work with General Supply, Fastenal, C.E. Beckman, Schuster Corporation, Southeastern Fire Equipment, all of New Bedford, as well as some firms in nearby Fairhaven. And that really was because of the leadership of this New Bedford team in really trying to reach out not just to the offshore wind industry and the developers, but as the mayor alluded to, looking at the whole supply chain that's going to be associated with this industry and seeing how can the resources of New Bedford be lined up against the needs of that supply chain to maximize what can happen here. One of the trends that's going to drive the growth of the offshore wind industry, even here in the United States, is climate change. And I know you're going to think, oh, you've been hearing that for years and very little has happened here politically in terms of, you know, changing the direction our country is going on in energy because of this threat. But I really do believe that is going to change in the coming years, that there's going to be a sea change of public opinion on this, just as there's literally a sea change in store as a result of climate change and many other changes as well. That will involve things like a carbon tax or other policies that will make technologies like offshore wind much more readily able to compete head-to-head with the established traditional energy sources. 2012 was the warmest year on record for the United States. Traditionally, these records are broken by 1/10 of a degree. In 2012, that record was broken by a full degree, an order of magnitude greater. Climate scientists say that the record droughts we've seen in the Midwest, that bizarre left hook that Sandy took into New Jersey, these are precisely the type of weather events climate scientists predict to become more and more common as a result of climate change. People are beginning to connect the dots, and it's going to have an effect on things like our industry. New Bedford is demonstrating it's willing to do its part to become part of an industry that can supply a lot of clean energy to the energy-hungry East Coast in the United States in a way that doesn't put carbon in the atmosphere and lets us reduce our energy consumption from sources that do. Investing in infrastructure that will create jobs and make New Bedford better economically for offloading cargo, as well as being the first site of its type in North America specifically designed for the staging and assembly of offshore wind turbines. That's real forward thinking. And the city is fortunate to have both the city leaders and the leaders in the state that are committed to making that happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark. Let me call Jeff Grabowski up from Deepwater Wind. Jeff is the Chief Executive Officer of Deepwater Wind and is responsible for the strategic direction and overall management of the company. Among the many hats that Jeff has worn over the years was the Chief of Staff to Governor of Rhode Island. So he comes with a breadth of experience, and I'm sure some of that experience will suit you well in this new industry that has an evolving regulatory terrain and where everything's new. So, Jeff, I'm happy that you're on the task force, and love to hear your thoughts.
Well, thank you, Mayor. We really appreciate your leadership. New Bedford is perfectly positioned geographically to take advantage of what we think will be one of the great trends for U.S. energy policy over the next 10 to 20 years. New Bedford just happens to sit geographically very close, the city that's closest to the largest offshore wind resource in the United States. We have the Saudi Arabia of offshore wind not very far from this port. And that's a tremendous opportunity. And Mayor Mitchell, we very much appreciate what you're trying to do here. Put together key members of the community that will have to come together to make this happen. We're close to this great resource, but it's not going to be easy to get there. So it's going to take leadership like you've demonstrated so far, Mayor, but also the help of our partners in organized labor, who will be an important part of this, our local supply chain partners and manufacturers, the folks that you've brought together today, as well as developers and friends in the government as well. Deepwater Wind has spent tens of millions of dollars to develop offshore wind in the Northeast. And we are very, very confident that we're going to build offshore wind farms right here in the Northeast. New Bedford will be one of the primary locations where those jobs will be created. It won't be the only location, but there will be a lot of jobs here. The problem is we've got some real challenges ahead. And luckily, New Bedford has started to address some of those problems. The development of this terminal is critical. You got to build it. You've done a great job so far. Get it across the finish line. Governor Patrick has showed great leadership. Bill White is the man who's going to get it done. Under your leadership as well, Mayor, I'm very confident you all are going to get that done. That's a huge piece of the pie, but it's not the only piece of the pie. There are a number of challenges that we work on every day. Governor Patrick and President Obama need to continue to show the great leadership that they've shown for renewable energy so far. And we're confident it's going to happen. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but over the course of the coming years, we hope to create a lot of jobs here in southeastern New England. New Bedford is perfectly positioned. We're very, very happy to be here today, and very happy to work with you, Mayor Mitchell. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff. In a similar vein, I wanted to invite Dan Cohen up to the microphone. Dan has had a breadth of business interests, many of which are maritime related, and he has specific interests here in New Bedford in the seafood industry, and he's looking now to the offshore wind industry as a place of opportunity for him, and Dan's perspective in this way is very unique, and Dan, I'm so glad you're on the committee, and please let us know what you're thinking.
Thank you, Mayor Mitchell. I appreciate your inviting me and Fishermen's Energy to participate in your task force and advisory committee. And in reality, it's an important role that you've asked us for, because New Bedford is not only hoping to be the hub of a new industry, it already is the center of the largest fishing industry in the United States in terms of your scout fleet here and the dollar values landed in New Bedford. And by far, clearly New Bedford is a long-term maritime history in terms of the whaling industry and the fishing industry. And the challenge that we see today are a number of challenges. First, I would agree with the speakers that global climate change is a real issue. And in fact, that's part of the motivation that we've taken in terms of helping develop Fishermen's Energy, because the real impacts we've already begun to see in the oceans in terms of changes in migratory patterns and changes in terms of die-offs of species such as off of Delmarva, surf clams, all due to climate change. The issue that we see is that we'll need to have a way of developing in the ocean two industries compatibly, because in fact, we don't want to build offshore wind and at the same time sacrifice commercial fishing. The reality is, how do we do them both in a compatible manner? And as there are impacts, which there will be impacts, there will be cumulative impacts, there will be some conflicts. How do we adjudicate them? How do we mitigate them? How do we mitigate them in a manner to respect those who might have to transfer one industry to another? The reality is that we're all at a point where change is necessary. Fishermen's Energy was formed by actually leaders of the East Coast fishing industry. We have participation from New Bedford. We have the principals who own well over 100 vessels, have facilities in New Bedford, Rhode Island, New York, New Jersey, Maryland, and Virginia. And the reality is that we were confronted that we can either be victims of change or agents of change. And in fact, you're doing the same thing. New Bedford itself was a city that needed to make change, and you've helped make change happen. And we're happy to stand with you to work together to try to make that a change that's compatible for both industries, because you need to stand on both. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Before we get to the local manufacturers, I wanted to call Joel Whitman up, who I met at the public hearing that we had a few months ago down in the South End concerning the EPA permit. And I came up to him after he spoke, and I told him I enjoyed his words. I don't think he knew I was the mayor or anything, but we just struck up a conversation. It was clear to me that this guy is a font of ideas, and we got to tap into him in some way. But he's a strategist at Global Marine Strategies, and this is a engineering and consulting firm that is on the cutting edge of the offshore wind industry here in the United States. And we're lucky to have you on board, Joel.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that very generous introduction. Up until the end of last year, I was a senior executive with a company called Global Marine Energy. Global Marine Energy was a wholly owned subsidiary of a company called Global Marine Systems Limited. It's a British company. It's been in the business of installing cables in the ocean of all types for 160 years. A few years ago, we decided to get into the offshore transmission industry, because the way we look at it, the turbines are secondary. It's really all about the cables and the transmission. That exercise may serve as a good example of the types of things that I like to talk to people in the U.S. about, and that's the direct job potential of an industry like this. If you can imagine what a work site looks like. Last summer was the busiest summer on record in the North Sea for offshore transmission installation for wind farms and other projects. A live site where that work begins maybe March, April-ish, weather permitting, and it ends in November. Once you hit the go button, you're working 24 hours a day all the way straight through. Focusing on cable installation, a cable ship like ours, we brought a new one onto the market last year, and that cable ship employs 40 people working a single shift, so it's 80 people around the clock. And then you're always going to have a shift back ashore because you have to be able to replace people as their time comes up. The investment on that vessel alone is somewhere in the neighborhood of $30 million, and there are not very many vessels like that in the United States. A vessel like that is just one small microcosm of what's happening all around you. So an active work site, maybe a vessel like ours is in the middle pulling cable, it's going to be surrounded by 40 to 50 other vessels, all doing various things, installing foundations, installing transition pieces. Those are the guys in front of us pulling cable, guarding the cable, making sure that everybody is behaving according to what Coast Guard regs or what the local regs are. And then the guys behind you with the expensive vessels installing turbines and finishing the site. A work site like that then requires good local access for port facilities, and that's the benefit of the ports that were mentioned earlier, all along the German coast, and we're very active in those ports when they were just nothing but kind of rusted out port facilities, and now they are kind of some of the most cutting edge places that you'd want to visit in the world if you're in the maritimes industry. Last summer we opened up a new facility in the northeast of England, the exact same thing that is trying to be done down here, and the beauty of it is when you look at the map and you look at the zone that the state of Massachusetts and the state of Rhode Island have done a fantastic job collaborating on, you have a development area of such size and scale and potential with the city of New Bedford, and then facilities down in Rhode Island like Quonset and to the north, all of which would be the logical places for you to work out of depending on what you're doing. So you might have a turbine laydown facility like is being envisioned here. You have cable import facilities, cable storage facilities. You have foundation design, foundation manufacture, and it creates this whole nucleus of activity, hub of activity, and you can look at it in Germany, you can look at it in the UK. It's happening now. We're doing some aggressive things in China, and there's absolutely no reason why, with the support of the state of Massachusetts, state of Rhode Island, and New Jersey was mentioned a few minutes ago, the East Coast could not become the next wave in that potential market. So personally, our experience has been very positive. So I said I was up until the end of the year, I was an executive of that company, and that's because we sold the company, Global Marine Energy, to one of the largest power cable or cable manufacturers in the world. And that's what you want to do. You want to be able to take a business that started as a small idea, a division of something else, grow it, and then put it where it belongs. And now it's in really good hands, I think, with a company that's going to be able to take it and grow it much beyond what we could have done. There's absolutely no reason why those things can't be done here. There's no reason why we couldn't get started right away. The same conditions exist here that existed in Germany and Denmark when we did projects there, and so I look forward to working with my colleagues on the panel and the folks here in New England, because I live here too, to get the industry started here. That way all of us can, rather than have to look far and away for these kind of things, we can see it in our own backyard. So thanks for your time and attention. Appreciate it. And thank you for having me on the panel.
Thank you, Joel. As I mentioned at the outset, the idea here isn't just to attract companies, but also to create opportunities for existing companies to participate in the supply chain. And one great possibility exists with one of our premier manufacturers in the city, and that's Precise. If you're not familiar with Precise, as the name suggests, manufactures very precise items, precision items, and specifically O-rings that can be found in lots of consumer goods, including the car you drive. Where's Dave?
Right here.
How many O-rings in your car, for instance?
115.
Okay, so they're out there, and they make lots of them, and they do it very well. And these many of these same types of O-rings can be found in the components of the windmills that we've been talking about. So Dave is intimately familiar with the workforce here in New Bedford. It's a company, Precise is a company that has succeeded here, and I hope Precise has a part to play in the development of the offshore wind industry here in New Bedford. Dave, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, John. Actually, who am I and why am I here? Well, I've been making components for windmills for 22 years for 3 different companies. So I've worked in California, I've worked in the European areas. It's exciting as heck. We have 342 people here in town. We make more than just O-rings. We actually make lip seals as well, too. So a lot of the things we make actually fit this product line very well. And also I can speak on behalf of the fact that I worked for 3 elastomer companies in 7 different locations. This is the best workforce I've ever had by far. So if you want to move your company here, please do. It's a great place to be. So. And one more comment, too, about, this is a national issue, international issue. It's also a state issue. But, part of my role is to help John and Matt be a cheerleader for New Bedford, and that's what I'm doing. But I'm not just making that up. I live every day. I've lived for 12 and a half years, and this is a great place to do business. And those windmills need to be made here, and local manufacturers like myself, and even the golf ball guys, who knows, we can support the guys offshore. So thanks, John.
Thanks a lot, Dave. Thank you, Dave. Wanted to next call up Gerard Duge, who's the president of the New England Maritimes Trade Council, which is affiliated with the AFL-CIO. The goal here is to create jobs for New Bedford residents in the long run. And the Maritimes trades have had a long history here in the city, and will continue to. We hope with the success of offshore wind here. And so, Gerard, happy to have you, and thanks for serving on the committee.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'm Gerard Dewey, excuse me, President of the Boston and New England Maritime Trades Council, but I am also an official with the Seafarers International Union for almost 30 years. And for a number of years, we had an office here in New Bedford, and we represented 175 groundfish vessels at one point. But I'd like to speak as wearing my hat as the President of the Boston New England Maritime Trades Council. We have been working with and advocating for and fighting for the Cape Wind project going back 11 years now. We first met with Jim Gordon and with Mark Rogers and a number of the other officials at Cape Wind back in 2002. 2003, early 2003, we negotiated and signed a proprietary labor agreement under which Cape Wind had committed that the work for the construction of the wind farm that they would be proposed for Horseshoe Shoals would be built with using manpower that would be provided through the signatory companies of the Boston New England Maritime Trades Council. Now, you might ask, what does that mean, and who are the affiliates of the Boston Maritime Trades Council? Well, they cover a wide gamut of the industrial workforce, unionized industrial workforce of the state. We have iron workers and laborers and pile drivers. We have electricians. We have cement masons. We have operating engineers. We have longshoremen. In fact, we represent over 60,000 unionized maritime, marine, industrial, and building construction trade workers across the country, across the region. Many of our locals are here and represent the southeastern Mass section of the Commonwealth. Now, when we first started out with Cape Wind, we were pretty naive and uninformed about what the undertaking would be to construct the wind farm and what would be required. This elongated process that Cape Wind has been required to go to has enabled us to develop our knowledge of not only what would be required for a workforce and a developer, with the needs of the developer here in the United States, but what they're doing in Europe. Now, some of that will be transferable, and some of it, the skills sets will be transferable. But we are comfortable that with the skill sets that we have and the people that we represent, we will be able to provide a well-trained, educated, and eventually experienced workforce that will be centered here in southeastern Massachusetts, in New Bedford, and we will be able to conduct and structure the training programs, identify the people that would fit into those training programs, and establish those training programs and apprenticeship programs that eventually will hopefully become the backbone of the workforce that will build not only the first in the nation offshore American wind farm, but also work with Fisherman's Energy and work with Deepwater in Rhode Island and any other developer who might have a need and a desire to work with us. Now, I'd like to touch on two things. Number one is Mark had mentioned the Frugo company. It's a Virginia company. They did the engineering and site work for Cape Wind last summer. It's a non-union company, but they came up here because of the reputation that had been established by the building trades and the maritime trades. They wanted to, and at the strong suggestion of Cape Wind, wanted to work with us to make sure that that work was performed using union labor. And it was done. We were able to negotiate and come to a very reasonable understanding and agreement with those companies. It's the model that we intend to implement and the model that we wanted to conduct our business under. We're going to be able to do an outreach to a number of entities, whether they be domestic or international, and prove to them that we can provide a very good workforce that is trained and will be able to provide the services they need within the economic models they want. And it's going to, again, be established here. We will be able to identify the workforce that we'll need for the future. We'll train and we'll put those individuals not only into a job that might last 18 or 24 months, but we will provide them with a career for the rest of their life so they can provide economically and financially for themselves and their families. Mayor, on behalf of the affiliates of the Maritime Trades Council and our friends of the building trades, we appreciate the opportunity to be here today and to be part of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerard. Last and certainly not least is Bill White, who has been the state's quarterback in the effort to establish offshore wind here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, here in New Bedford in particular. It's great working with Bill. He really knows what he's doing. He's enthusiastic about the project, and he's a terrific emissary of a terrific governor for the city of New Bedford. And Bill, we've got a lot of work ahead, but it's going well so far.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm Bill White. On behalf of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and Governor Patrick and the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, we are honored to be a participant in Mayor Mitchell's Offshore Wind Task Force Advisory Committee. New Bedford, in a way, has been like a second home to me. I've been working for the last 5 years in the administration, and I think whenever I go to a public meeting or make a presentation, I know half the room by name, and that's a good thing. So I am very much honored and looking forward to participating both in the advisory committee, but also as well as overseeing the construction of what we think will be a transformative investment, not only for the city of New Bedford, but the South Coast, as well as the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and that is the New Bedford Marine Commerce Terminal. It is going to change the world, and I'm fired up about it. The other quick thing I will just say, I mean, it has been said earlier about what we're all kind of, our focus here. The rationale for offshore wind is just so clear, you know, it just makes so much sense. And we ask all of you to kind of be our emissaries also, but climate change, we just talked about climate change. Climate change is real. Even though there is skeptics, that does not mean they are correct. Climate change is happening. Massachusetts, and particularly South Coastal state regions and cities, need to take this issue very, very seriously. There's probably not another. My friend earlier spoke about a carbon tax. That has come and gone. Maybe somebody else will resurrect it. But if the federal leadership in this country, and I think they will, want to take on the issue of climate change, there's probably offshore wind is probably the most significant investment they could take in order to incentivize it. The second thing is energy security. We talk a lot about energy security. Most of you know this because you pay your electric bills and everything else every single month. But almost all of our power comes from out of the state, most of it out of the country. I mean, if we just think rationally about this decision about creating our own indigenous resource, offshore wind, it just makes so much sense, and we can be away from that kind of what Governor Patrick says, the roller coaster of fossil fuel energy. And then finally, the third issue is jobs. The mayor reminds me about jobs every single day, and he should. And jobs, I mean, this industry, can you imagine if we spend about, what's the number, Matt, about how much money this Commonwealth of Massachusetts spends on energy every single year? A lot, Bill. It's actually, Christ, I see the chart.
22 billion.
So, all right, there it is. It is. All right, phew, thank God somebody saved me. $22 billion a year, 80% of that goes out of the state. Can you imagine if we actually keep that resource, generate our own electricity, and actually the economic benefits, not only for New Bedford, but the South Coast and Massachusetts? We are going to change the world on that front, and we're going to create a whole new industry of legitimate, proud, productive jobs that every single individual can tell the kids about it and how proud they are. So thank you very much for having me, Mr. Mayor. I'm looking forward to it.
Great, thanks, Bill. All right, thank you, everyone. I have time for, we have time for questions if you have any. Natalie?
Are there any specific goals that you're interested in having your task force accomplish?
We're going to meet regularly, perhaps quarterly or so, and the idea is to get a handle on what this industry looks like. And we have a sense of what's happened in Europe, but what happened in Europe will not play out exactly the same here in the United States. There's a different regulatory environment. The energy needs are different. Infrastructure is different in places. So we know the industry is coming here, but there are lots of variables that we need to get a handle on in order to market ourselves well, to tell the world about New Bedford's story and why New Bedford is a good place to do business, not just for this in this industry, but in others. And in order for us to have a good sense of what we should be telling our colleagues in the state and federal government about how what kinds of regulations make sense for this industry and which ones don't. So, I mean, those among other tasks are needed. And it's an advisory committee, so there aren't specific benchmarks that we're looking to hit. But it's really about, from New Bedford's standpoint, an exercise in learning more so that we can position ourselves well. And from the standpoint of the participants, it's a matter of they're sharing contacts, and it's a matter of they're getting to know what New Bedford can offer, but it's also an effort in their getting a better sense of what's possible and where trends are going. Okay, all right, thank you very much, everybody.